Hello, welcome to ReviveFM 94.0 with your host Zain Hussain. The conference on the establishment of a Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction held its first session from 18th November to 22nd of November 2019 at the UN headquarters in New York under the chairmanship of Ambassador Sima Bahous of Jordan. This came at a time when attempts at discussing the issue of eradicating weapons of mass destruction from the Middle East and creating a WMD free zone in the Middle East has been gaining momentum in some academic and diplomatic spaces. However, there remains a severe lack of civil society and wider engagement on the issue of WMD disarmament in the Middle East and in other places around the world. What are the reasons for this? What are weapons of mass destruction, and why are people calling for disarmament of them? Today, I have with me Dina Saadallah, a security analyst from Jordan, with whom I'll be discussing these issues. Hello, Dina. It's great to have you on the show.
Hi, thank you for having me here.
So, Dina, please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, I am Dina Saadallah. I am from Jordan. I'm a security analyst with experience in project coordination, research, and analyzing global international nuclear disarmament, as well as in the Middle East on the weapons of mass destruction free zone.
So, Dina, it's great to have you, and it's great to be discussing these issues with you. Let's get straight to the point. What are weapons of mass destruction?
So when we're talking about weapons, it's important to have a clear distinction about two main categories. We have conventional weapons and we have non-conventional weapons. So when we're talking about conventional weapons, we're talking about the weapons that you see in everyday real life. Those are the weapons that you see armed forces holding, you see the police armed with. Those are the firearms that you can go into a store and buy and purchase if you can. Those are the conventional weapons. And then the other category is non-conventional weapons. But for the sake of the show today, we're calling them weapons of mass destruction. Now, when we're looking at the weapons of mass destruction, they are extremely sophisticated weapons. They are highly successful in eradicating an opponent when they are used in warfare. When we're looking at weapons of mass destruction, we have three main types. First of all, we have chemical weapons. Chemical weapons, basically, we are using highly toxic chemical materials. The aim of them is to temporarily or permanently asphyxiate, poison, or even create burns and blisters on the skin. They can even cause blindness. So those are chemical weapons. Next, we have biological weapons. Biological weapons, we are using naturally occurring bacterium, viruses, and fungi, and we are weaponizing them in order to become a biological weapon.
Yes.
And then thirdly, which is the most controversial of all, we are talking about nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons, basically in the most simplest form, and it's actually the most complicated one of them all, is the fission of nuclear atoms under severe pressure and severe temperatures in order to create a blast of energy and radioactive material that eradicates the opponent.
So, Dina, why are nuclear weapons considered the most, by many people, the most controversial of weapons of mass destruction?
Nuclear weapons are highly controversial for many reasons. First of all, they are extremely highly sophisticated science that very few people are able to study it. And nuclear weapons themselves, throughout history, they've only been used twice in warfare, which is during the Second World War in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And there have been numerous nuclear weapon tests throughout history. But what happens is when nuclear weapons are used in an area, what happens is that their impact is severe. So a single nuclear weapon device, has the same impact of several thousand kilotons of conventional bombs, conventional explosives. And so we are talking about extremely powerful equipment, which is the nuclear weapon. And what they do is that they create indiscriminate damage to an entire environment, indiscriminate damage to organisms, whether we're talking about people, livestock, cattle. Their impact, the radiological impact, lasts for several thousand years. I'm talking, this is going to be beyond our grandchildren.
So clearly, these weapons of mass destruction are, well, they're destructive, and their use could be fatal, would be fatal to thousands of people,
Exactly.
particularly nuclear weapons. But given how dangerous these weapons are, and even how dangerous they can be to store, and how risky they are to store, um, why are there states out there who are acquiring these weapons? Why are some states choosing to acquire such weapons of mass destruction?
Yeah, so in fact, actually, under the eyes of the international community, the use and having those weapons is banned. But in truth, is many states across the planet still have stockpiles of those weapons of mass destruction. And the main reason, it goes down to the theory of deterrence. What is deterrence? Basically, the idea of deterrence is when one state has a form of WMD, all the states around it will be deterred in attacking them because they know that they can respond to them with those WMDs.
Yeah.
So this is the theory of deterrence. And the idea is that this will end wars. Well, we haven't really ended wars. There are still conventional wars happening.
Um, Thank you for outlining the concept of deterrence. And indeed, we're not going to be debating it in great detail in this show right now. There's a great deal of literature out there dealing with the concept of deterrence, particularly nuclear deterrence. Could you give us a little bit more detail about how dangerous weapons of mass destruction can be to human beings, to populations, and to the environment?
Yes. So all types of weapons of mass destruction, whether we were looking at the chemical, biological, or nuclear, have severe lasting impact on the ground zero point, which is the point of detonation. And so, uh, actually, weapons of mass destruction are considered part of modern warfare, but the truth of the matter is, chemical and biological weapons have been used extensively in ancient history. Um, what used to happen is that they would enter toxic materials into water supplies. They would poison cattle in order to starve a community, and so there's a large history on this. But modern chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons, their impact is so severe it lasts for decades. One example I can give off is there was biological weapon testing of anthrax in an island across Scotland. And what happened is that the island was contaminated with anthrax, which is a biological weapon, and it was so severe that the island was contaminated for decades. For decades, that whole island was closed off.
Yes.
When we look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, up until now, there are cases of birth defects. We are talking about water, air pollution, and the problem is the impact is lasting. So it's not just in the area, but all the areas surrounding the area of impact is severely impacted.
Yes, and with nuclear weapons, for example, they create birth defects, and they create, birth defects that can last for generations, right? And
Cancers.
yes, what are there international agreements out there to contain the spread of these weapons?
Yes, there are. So, in fact, there are numerous treaties. So, when we're talking about a treaty, is a contract between a number of states in which those states hereby, under the agreement, say that they declare they will not stockpile any of those weapons of mass destruction in their areas. And so, we have the Chemical Weapons Convention, the Biological Weapons Convention, and then we have the Nuclear Weapons Convention. The Non-Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, of course.
And what is the nuclear non-proliferation treaty? Could you give us a little bit more detail about it?
Yes, so the NPT is actually the first of them. The NPT goes back in its history to the 60s, and so it is connected to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Testing. And then we have the NPT. The NPT basically states that any state that signs the NPT declares that it will not stockpile nuclear weapons, it will not stockpile nuclear materials, and that they will promote the three main pillars of the NPT, which is nuclear non-proliferation, disarmament, and maintaining peaceful uses of nuclear materials.
Yeah, and of course, there are beneficiaries. There are state parties to the nuclear weapon non-proliferation treaty,
Mhm.
which are allowed to maintain nuclear weapons, with the eventual goal of disarmament.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes,
That is the
uh,
eventual goal.
yes. Does that create issues within international discussions concerning nuclear weapons? I mean, I'm sure there are states who consider this quite unfair, that there are some states which are party to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, such as the US and Russia, who possess nuclear weapons. And, there are states that are not, that do not possess nuclear weapons and are party to the treaty are not allowed to possess them.
Exactly. So there is actually a lot of discussion about the authenticity of the NPT, and especially that this year in 2020, it's 50 years old. We reached the 50-year anniversary. There are a lot of questions about, is it fair? Is the NPT perpetuating the continuation of the existence of nuclear weapons in Western powerful nations? And it's stopping other smaller nations from having them or not?
Well, we're going to discuss that later, when we are talking about the Middle East, and some of the issues that are raised in international conversations around nuclear weapons, and the kind of unfair discourse that happens around them. So, Dina, when it comes to weapons of mass destruction, a lot of people see these weapons as a means of ultimate protection, and some people believe that by possessing nuclear weapons, they would feel safe. Not mostly because of the concept of deterrence, but to a lot of people who might have this mentality that we have countries that do possess nuclear weapons, and maybe we want to create a situation where there isn't such a monopoly of power in the international arena. So, what is your response to people who say such things?
Well, the truth of the matter is, when it comes to nuclear weapons, of course, it's a very highly controversial topic. And for many years, there has been a discussion on, is deterrence actually a valid concept? So there are many criticisms about the concept of deterrence, whether it's actually working or not. If a state obtains the kinds of weapons, are they actually protected themselves, or are they putting themselves in the face of international scrutiny, international sanctions, where they cannot have economic agreements with other states because of these weapons?
I mean, we still have arms races between different countries, and the nuclear arms race hasn't ended, and especially with the type of nuclear weapons that we have now called tactical nuclear weapons, that are nuclear weapons that could possibly be used in the battlefield, for example. Um, Actually, some people would argue that there is a danger that they could be used, and that if the concept of deterrence is something that can actually be debated, the fact that it is a potentially shaky concept, um, it means that it's not a very smart idea to possess nuclear weapons and to work towards possessing them. And moreover, there are so many costs associated with maintaining nuclear warheads. For example, in the US, millions, billions are spent on maintaining them, um, and the potential costs of these are really great. And that money can be used for social initiatives, for social welfare issues.
Exactly, Zain. I'm sure you've seen them at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. There were comparisons where there were data coming out on how much there is spending. So nuclear weapon states, how much they spend on the maintenance of their nuclear arsenal, and they were looking at those numbers and saying, well, those numbers, if they were actually put in the healthcare, we probably would have been more prepared for a pandemic of this size. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of people think that if you have a nuclear weapon arsenal, you just put it in your basement and, oh, it's there. No, it costs a lot to maintain them.
Yes, exactly. And also, so when it comes to when people are making these arguments about why a state should possess nuclear weapons, why it would make them safer, given that it would cost so much, in your eyes, is it even worth it to work to spend the resources and the time and the money in such an endeavor?
In my opinion, no, because we actually have an alternative, which is conventional weapons. Conventional weapons are very sophisticated. They're improving year after year, and they are expensive as it is. And so conventional weapons sales are rising year after year. And so the question is, why do we still need weapons of mass destruction that are extremely costly compared to conventional weapons, extremely dangerous? I mean, the fact that there could be the potential for a war, they could be used, the potential for accidental detonation or leakage, if there could be leakage, and how can you control that? So the damage is too high.
Exactly. And, before we go on the break, I do want to, ask you to maybe talk a little bit about the issue of weapons of mass destruction in the context of the Middle East.
Yes, so when it comes to the Middle East, there have been talks since all the way back to the 1970s about the creation of a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. So we're talking about a geographical area consisting of the Middle East that has no form of weapons of mass destruction. The truth of the matter is a lot of people within the Middle East are not aware of the existence of weapons of mass destruction within the Middle East region, number one. Number two, a lot of people are not aware that their states have not signed all main three treaties that pertain to chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. And number three, a lot of people are not aware of the dangers, the potential dangers of these weapons, whether it's accidental, there's a leakage, how it could impact their lives.
Yes. So thank you. So far, we've set the scene for further discussion that we will have after the break. Thank you so much, Dina Saadallah, so far for setting the scene when it comes to weapons of mass destruction. We are going to talk in more detail also later about the fact that conversations around weapons of mass destruction often happen within quite an elitist setting, using using vocabulary that not everybody is familiar with, and that's a big reason why we decided we should do a show on this issue, actually discussing issues that can affect all of us in ways that we all can understand and participate in these conversations. We're going to take a short break. Thank you for tuning in so far. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us after the break to continue this conversation.
Amigos, the signature name when it comes to burgers and shakes. Our succulent burgers are prepared in front of you while you wait. Whether you go for our 6-ounce Mexican or our 10-ounce Texan, or you decide to go for our messy fries or our buffalo wings, one thing you're guaranteed is quality. Dine in with your friends and family at 400 Cranbrook Road, Gants Hill, or order in on Uber Eats, Just Eat or Deliveroo. Amigos, hats off to great burgers.
Nitro Treats, the dessert lab where your treats are formulated before your very eyes. Keep cool with our flavoured shaved ice, or chill out with our exclusive Dragon Breath Nitro ice creams. Experiment with our selection of mojitos, or indulge in our traditional faludas or lassies. Visit Nitro Treats at 210 Ilford Lane, where our nitrologists remain ready to serve. Nitro Treats, it's nitrolicious.
If you're looking for a unique bespoke cake made especially for your big day, then look no further. Here at Sugar Sprinkle Cakery, we design some of the most imaginative and delicious home-baked cakes for your special occasions. We do fresh cream, buttercream, eggless and vegan cakes. Check us out on Instagram or Facebook at Sugar Sprinkle Cakery, or just call 07932 665 833. That's 07932 665 833.
Looking to get your finances in order? MR Accountants has you covered. We provide a full range of accountancy and taxation services, including annual and management accounts, self-assessment tax returns, VAT, bookkeeping and payroll services. We ensure you're kept up to date with the latest legislation, and our client-focused approach helps us plan your business finances from savings to investments. We are MR Accountants. Visit our website at mraccountants.com or call us on 0203 432 9138.
Thinking about selling or letting your home? With Maxwell Estates, you don't need to look any further. Well established with over 15 years of experience, Maxwell Estates are specialists in residential sales and lettings. We manage over 200 properties in and around Northwest London, keeping our landlords and tenants updated with all the latest laws and legislations. Based in Edgware, our experienced specialist negotiators always ensure we maximise the full potential of your property. Call us now on 0208 952 0808 for a free no obligation quotation, or visit our website www.maxwellestates.co.uk for further information. Maxwell Estates, the name you can trust.
Kebabish Original, one of the biggest names in the restaurant trade. Visit your local KO to experience the thrill of the grill and the most authentic Pakistani cuisine. From our kebabs to our curries and from our mixed platters to our peri-peri, our chefs prepare your food in front of you while you wait. KO is now offering franchise opportunities. To take advantage of our proven and successful business model, contact us on 0208 446 7779 or visit kebabishoriginal.co.uk.
ReviveFM
94.0 on the radio,
on your mobile,
and online.
Hello and welcome back to ReviveFM 94.0 with your host Zain Hussain. I'm joined with Dina Saadallah, a security analyst from Jordan, to discuss issues relating to weapons of mass destruction, disarmament in the Middle East, and also a lot of the issues that we'll be talking about apply to weapons of mass destruction in other places around the world. So Dina, so far we've set the scene when it comes to weapons of mass destruction. Now, what exactly do we mean when we're talking about disarmament?
Yes, so when we're talking about disarmament, we are talking about a state that has already a stockpile of weapons of mass destruction, and they are disarming. So when you're disarming, it basically means that you're either you're detonating those weapons, all of the stockpile that you have. So that means that you no longer have them, or you are moving them outside of your territory. It could be happening through working with an international organization in order to take those weapons outside of your area. And so this is basically what we're talking about. When we're talking about weapons of mass destruction, disarmament, it means that we are looking at the concept of how can we get rid our region in the Middle East, how can we rid other regions in the world of those weapons. Now, throughout the years, there are multiple states that have of their own accord, they have disarmed their stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction for multiple reasons. But the way that we're seeing it is that when we are looking at nuclear weapons disarmament, the fact that the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is now 50 years old, there hasn't been enough progress happening.
Yes.
We've expected that we would be, actually the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, it was actually supposed to expire in 1995, but
Wow.
It's been extended because there has been significant lack of progress on the part of major nuclear weapon states to disarm.
And so, unfortunately, a lot of conversations around nuclear disarmament, it seems to be quite performative, right? It seems to be that, we're not going, there are less nuclear warheads than there used to be, but then there are now also tactical nuclear weapons that can be used on the battlefield. There are, there are other ways in which nuclear weapons are developing, for example, in terms of the platforms that are used and to deploy nuclear weapons. When we're talking about disarmament work and we're talking about civil society engagement in disarmament, what do we mean by civil society?
So by civil society, we're talking about everyday persons. We're talking about a society of community in which you have people rallying around a cause, and they're actively engaged in promoting it and working towards a cause.
Right. And so the civil society work that would be taking place is in the interests of people in general, and which is why it's called civil society. and obviously when it comes to weapons of mass destruction disarmament, there has been work going on. There's a great deal of work going on, but there are also limits to the extent to which everyday people and civil society are engaged properly. Dina, from your experience, when we're talking about weapons of mass destruction disarmament work in the Middle East, what are some of the barriers to civil society and social engagement in this issue?
So, based on my experience, when we're looking at the Middle East and when we're having discussions about weapons of mass destruction disarmament and the creation of the zone, most of the discussions, if you go online and you're looking for journals, if you're looking at newspaper articles, if you're looking at interviews, it's all focused on the geostrategic level, which is valid. We're looking at the geostrategic level. We're looking at the intersection of economics with politics, with allies, with interreligious war. We're looking at all these issues, but it's all at the surface. It's all touching the surface of the state. There is not enough. There's not enough progress when we're looking at civil society. It's almost not discussed, barely ever discussed, and so the whole scope of our discussion, as we said today, is that we're looking at why is there not enough civil society engagement in the Middle East. And so the truth of the matter is we need to be honest. There are plenty of barriers to this. The first barrier is, and the most obvious one, is the lack of awareness. People in the Middle East, weapons, especially nuclear weapons are seen as a Cold War era phenomenon. During the Cold War, the numbers of nuclear warheads throughout the planet were exponentially high, and with the end of the Cold War, the number of warheads are less. But that doesn't mean that the danger of nuclear weapons is not still there. But when we're looking at the Middle East, people are generally not aware of this. They assume that, the Cold War is over and this is nothing to be concerned about. But and the reason for that is it has to do with education. If we're looking at education, and of course we're talking about the Middle East generally, so we're not going to look at a state by state example because we won't have enough time.
Yes,
but
exactly.
We're speaking about the Middle East generally, is that when it comes to education, if we're looking at school systems, if we're looking at universities, even when it comes to international relations program, they might have a very short chapter that's discussing WMDs.
But Dina, when it comes to weapons of mass destruction, I mean, of course, maybe one of the barriers is education, but isn't another barrier also the fact that people just have much more important things and immediate concerns to be worried about?
Yes, and this brings us to another barrier, which is a general sense of apathy. There is a general sense of, why should I even be concerned about this? And so when you're looking at people, Middle Easterns who are in war-torn zones, their most immediate thing is that they want to be safe. They want them to be, their families, they want to be safe. They're in a civil war, they're in a terrible condition. And so when the most immediate concern is disarmament on a conventional level and to have peace. But when we're looking at other areas that are not war-torn, we're looking at people who are, we have we have so many youth within the Middle East, with the highest. And what we're looking at is we have people who are struggling to find a job. There's a lot of unemployment. We are looking at people who are trying to, they want to have a stable job. They are concerned about having food on the table. They are concerned about education, about their future and the future of their kids. And so the average person in the Middle East simply has far more pressing concerns than to worry about WMD disarmament.
But say, for example, even if you wanted to be involved in this conversation more and you wanted to engage more in the issue of WMD disarmaments within the region and around the world in general, because I believe this is an issue everywhere when we're talking about weapons of mass destruction. These conversations, they happen, I feel, in ways in which are not so accessible to everybody.
Exactly. And so this brings us to another category in the Middle East, which is the elitist category. So you have a group of people who are highly educated, very wealthy, so they're not concerned about having food on the table. And they are interested in this topic, whether is it because of their diplomatic ties, their military ties, or international ties to international organizations. It is seen as a topic for them where there is to the average person, they see those elitist people as having, it's just a debating exercise, debating disarmament and WMDs. And so there's actually this perception that for the average person, they see that this is a topic that's unapproachable to them because because it is constrained to a group of elitist people within the Middle East.
But Dina, I mean, Dina, why is that? I mean, is it because people see the issue of weapons of mass destruction as detached from other concerns and other political and social concerns?
Part of it, yes. So a lot of them see that the whole concept of weapons of mass destruction, disarmament in the Middle East, a lot of the average people see that, number one, this is a very difficult and complex issue. They feel that they feel that they cannot have an impact on it. They feel that it is complex, it is intertwined with regional political issues, international allies of the Middle East. They feel that this is a topic that is also connected to some aspects of post-colonialism within the region. And
Can you go into more detail about what you mean when you say post-colonialism? Like, what do you mean when you're talking about that in the context of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction?
Yeah, so there's the perception and I've seen this a lot of times in the Middle East, where a lot of people see that weapons of mass destruction are a product of the West in order to maintain power over other areas of the world. And so they see that a lot of people in the Middle East, whenever they see approaches of weapons of mass destruction, disarmament in the Middle East, they view it with suspicion. They view it as being supported by the West in order to hunker down on the Middle East and keep the Middle East in powerless.
Yeah, in a state of subordinacy. I mean, that it makes sense what you're saying, but it also makes sense that a lot of people think like this. I mean, how would you respond to somebody who says something to you like this?
Well, actually, this actually brings us back to another challenge of engaging civil society, is the fear that if you engage with civil society on weapons of mass destruction, disarmament, the fear is that it might backfire, and that instead you might have a civil society that's in support of WMDs proliferating and spreading across the Middle East. And so this all has to go back to awareness and education. Weapons of mass destruction are extremely dangerous and they're extremely expensive weapons. If you're looking at if we're looking at a nuclear weapon from A to Z, just the amount of effort, money, and time, it takes years to have the financial capital, to have the human resources and the political will. It's a mammoth effort. But if you look at that, how about we use that money elsewhere that is more necessary in the Middle East? Open new businesses, create jobs, work in the agricultural fields, and work in education. So this is the argument that we should make sure that civil society in the Middle East makes people aware that this is expensive, costly, and it is very dangerous materials.
Exactly. And, even when we're not talking about the concerns around finance, for example, chemical weapons, when they're used, they're incredibly harmful, and it is really difficult to contain their effects. So it's really difficult to use them in a way that is discriminate. You end up harming civilians as well as combatants. You end up harming the wrong people.
Exactly, because as I mentioned, that weapons of mass destruction, they're very successful in their aim, which is to eradicate the opponent and to paralyze them or to end their lives. And they're so superior is that their impact is indiscriminate. If it's thrown in one area, it's not just going to eradicate your opponent, but we're also talking about impacting livestock, the environment, and fully contaminating the area, whether it's through chemical intoxication, biological organism that is contaminating everything, or if we're looking at nuclear radiological impact. And so,
Sorry, carry on.
yes, and so another issue that we have in the Middle East is when we are having a discussion about weapons of mass destruction, not only is it very elitist discussion on the level of diplomats and academics, international organizations, but the language that's used, it's very unapproachable. It's a very difficult language that's extremely technical. And so for the average person, it also has to do a lot with the messaging. What is the message that we're giving to them?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I actually did want to go back to the issue of the elitism of the issue of the, or to put it better, the lack of accessibility of the issue, right? I mean, I don't know how many open public forums in which weapons of mass destruction are actually are actually happening. How many of those discussions are happening in very open public forums in ways that everybody can understand. In fact, I would go as far as saying that when it comes to arms and weapons in general, that this is an issue. I mean, we don't hear about the latest developments in terms of arms and weapons. We don't hear about what's going on. I mean, there is news now and then, and it's not as if the information is completely secret and that you can't access it anywhere. It's that it's not done so in a very open way, at least in the Western world. And I'm guessing, in the Middle East, this is also an issue.
Yes, this is also an issue. And because even if there is an international organization or even there's a grassroots movement within the Middle East and they want to rally around this cause, what's even doubly more difficult in the Middle East is bureaucracy. And so,
yes,
generally speaking, so of course it's different from one state to another, but generally speaking, in the Middle East, if you are a grassroots movement, in order to receive state recognition, rent offices, if you want to start a civil efforts within the state, if you want to open conferences or meeting rooms and discussions, it's a long, arduous process, and it takes a lot of time. And also there's the question of funding. Are you able to receive funding for a topic like this? So there are bureaucratic challenges that make it difficult, even more difficult for grassroots initiatives within the Middle East. There have been, and there are ones, but the barriers in front of them sometimes appear too daunting. And also, I think this also, even international organizations, I feel that they are also aware of the bureaucratic difficulties, and this actually might push them away from even willing to invest, let alone the perception that I've come across speaking to diplomats from outside of the Middle East who are convinced that, well, people in the Middle East just don't care about this topic.
Yes, I mean, when you were talking about this is actually one of the things that came into my mind, and it is a problem because when organizations and other activists from outside of a region, let's say now we're talking about the Middle East, make these kinds of judgments, they're doing it from a lack of understanding of the barriers that exist towards dealing with them. And actually this goes back also to the elitism issue, that if you are talking about these issues generally speaking in a high level environment and you belong to that environment, you're going to be less aware of structural difficulties when it comes to everyday people discussing these issues. And also this goes back to the education point that we raised, right, which we spoke about. That actually, even when it comes to studying of international relations and international politics, I don't know the extent to which weapons of mass destruction are even discussed within those settings, even though they are important when we're talking about geopolitical relations, right?
Of course, absolutely. The discussion on the geopolitical level is absolutely important, because when we're looking at why has there not been enough progress and why is it so slow in the Middle East to create a weapons of mass destruction free zone, it is obviously important to understand what is the geopolitical level. On the geopolitical level, what are the wars, what are events that are happening in the Middle East that are impeding this regional security and so on. This is all valid. Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
But when we're looking at civil society, we are not seeing enough civil society. And I've seen perceptions from outside of the Middle East that, well, just civil society in the Middle East is not concerned about this. But apart from the fact that there is awareness of the bureaucracy and how difficult it is to rally for a cause and have a civil society in the Middle East. This also connects to the fact that international organizations, when they approach the Middle East, they're not making an effort to approach civil society. And even when they do, there's also a problem of not being aware of cultural structures.
Yes, exactly.
Not being aware of cultural barriers, also language barriers. You definitely need someone from within the Middle East to, people from the Middle East. We have so many youth within the Middle East, and they're highly educated, they're highly ambitious. They want to really do something in their lives, and so the perception that there is just lack of interest, it baffles me.
Exactly. And thank you so much for ending this segment on that note. And we will continue the conversation from here after the break. Please don't go anywhere.
Amigos, the signature name when it comes to burgers and shakes. Our succulent burgers are prepared in front of you while you wait. Whether you go for our 6-ounce Mexican or our 10-ounce Texan, or you decide to go for our messy fries or our buffalo wings, one thing you're guaranteed is quality. Dine in with your friends and family at 400 Cranbrook Road, Gants Hill, or order in on Uber Eats, Just Eat or Deliveroo. Amigos, hats off to great burgers.
Nitro Treats, the dessert lab where your treats are formulated before your very eyes. Keep cool with our flavoured shaved ice, or chill out with our exclusive Dragon Breath Nitro ice creams. Experiment with our selection of mojitos, or indulge in our traditional faludas or lassies. Visit Nitro Treats at 210 Ilford Lane, where our nitrologists remain ready to serve. Nitro Treats, it's nitrolicious.
If you're looking for a unique bespoke cake made especially for your big day, then look no further. Here at Sugar Sprinkle Cakery, we design some of the most imaginative and delicious home-baked cakes for your special occasions. We do fresh cream, buttercream, eggless and vegan cakes. Check us out on Instagram or Facebook at Sugar Sprinkle Cakery, or just call 07932 665 833. That's 07932 665 833.
Looking to get your finances in order? MR Accountants has you covered. We provide a full range of accountancy and taxation services, including annual and management accounts, self-assessment tax returns, VAT, bookkeeping and payroll services. We ensure you're kept up to date with the latest legislation, and our client-focused approach helps us plan your business finances from savings to investments. We are MR Accountants. Visit our website at mraccountants.com or call us on 0203 432 9138.
Thinking about selling or letting your home? With Maxwell Estates, you don't need to look any further. Well established with over 15 years of experience, Maxwell Estates are specialists in residential sales and lettings. We manage over 200 properties in and around Northwest London, keeping our landlords and tenants updated with all the latest laws and legislations. Based in Edgware, our experienced specialist negotiators always ensure we maximize the full potential of your property. Call us now on 0208 952 0808 for a free no obligation quotation, or visit our website www.maxwellestates.co.uk for further information. Maxwell Estates, the name you can trust.
Kebabish Original, one of the biggest names in the restaurant trade. Visit your local KO to experience the thrill of the grill and the most authentic Pakistani cuisine. From our kebabs to our curries, and from our mixed platters to our peri-peri, our chefs prepare your food in front of you while you wait. KO is now offering franchise opportunities. To take advantage of our proven and successful business model, contact us on 0208 446 7779 or visit kebabishoriginal.co.uk.
ReviveFM 94.0. On the radio,
On your mobile.
and online.
Welcome back to ReviveFM 94.0 with your host Zain Hussain. Today I'm talking with Dina Saadallah, a security analyst from Jordan, concerning weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East and disarmament from them, and the barriers to social and civil society engagement in disarmament work. Dina, there is an issue that I actually wanted to touch on, which I didn't get to do in the first segment. When it comes to conventional weapons, for example, there are always fears that non-state actors, terrorists, other groups will get their hands on these weapons. Don't these fears also exist around weapons of mass destruction?
Yes, absolutely. The fear definitely applies to weapons of mass destruction because it is possible that, let's say that when it comes to weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East, the materials, the technology, the science, there could be a leakage. The information could end up in the wrong hands, and non-state actors could potentially use this technology in order to create their own weapons, create their own territory, and then they might start inflicting fear in their neighboring states. And they might be unrhetorical, where they might not see any barrier to why they shouldn't be using it. So, for example, a lot of people keep saying that nuclear weapon states are rational and logical, and that they have the stockpiles, but they're not using it. But, well, who knows? Maybe within the next 40, 50, 60 years, something might happen, and there could be an all-out nuclear war. But within the region of the Middle East, there is an added fear of those weapons ending up in the wrong hands, ending up in non-state actors. And so this is a double fear of why we should make sure that those weapons and their materials do not exist within the Middle East.
Exactly. Thank you for adding that point, Dina. And it just, it's an important point to add, because actually we're not just talking about states, and we're talking about the possibility of much more suffering than we can ever imagine. Okay, so thank you for touching on that point. I want to move on now. We have discussed so far weapons of mass destruction, what they are, the situation around the world. We've discussed barriers to civil society and social engagement when it comes to the Middle East, and a lot of those points also apply in general to other places around the world. I mean, just to give one example, I've also been involved in disarmament work, and I've noticed specifically when it comes to nuclear disarmament that this conversation is maintained within a very high elitist level and remains very confined to some diplomatic and academic settings. The extent to which this is so widespread is very minimal. There are some grassroots activity work happening in the UK, for example, but it's simply not enough, especially when it comes to the UK. There are clearly, as I've said before, there are clearly attempts at work in this area, for example, when it comes to international organizations. And before the break, you touched on some ways in which there are issues in which some international organizations engage civil society in the Middle East, namely that it's not being done enough. Now that we've kind of set the scene and we've spoken about the issues with engagement, clearly we can do something. What can be done now?
Well, what can be done now is, now that we are aware of the barriers in front of civil society in the Middle East, well, on the other hand, what can be done? So that is the main issue that we're having here. And basically, the way that we see it is that environmentalists actually have a very big say on this topic. And so we have environmental societies across the Middle East that are very active within their universities. And we also have international organizations that work within the Middle East in the protection of water, soil, agricultural sources. And so you can have the grassroots efforts with international organizations together. They can, together or separately, there can be an effort in order to bring civil society to the fore. They can start discussions with their professors in their universities. They can start having local events on their city level, just having local events. Maybe they can start sending pamphlets across their neighborhoods. Maybe they can even have a discussion with their grandparents and their aunts. It's baby steps. And so some people might say, oh, well, what can civil society do? Well, the fact is, if you look throughout history, there are valid examples in the West that, for example, one example I can give is the Women for Peace protests and peaceful protests in the United States in the early 1960s. It was 50,000 women, mothers, who were protesting against nuclear weapon dangers because they were concerned about radiological impact on food, water, and soil, on dairy and milk that their children are drinking. And so this actually led to the nuclear test ban treaty and had an impact on the creation of on rallying for the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. And there are numerous more examples in Europe.
This is a good example of how society level work and civil society work can actually make a real difference, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yes, and I think that when it comes to this, a lot of people are just hopeless. When it comes to this issue and other issues, specifically because of the factors that we mentioned before. One of the main ones, in my opinion, being the lack of accessibility of these issues and conversations to to everyone else. It's not even about being particularly clever or anything. It's about having access to that information. And yes, of course, there are a lot of aspects of conversation around weapons of mass destruction that are indeed technical, but there are things that we can all be concerned about: the potential effects that they would have to us, for example, if they were used, and whenever they are used. The long-term effects on health. There are chemical weapons like nerve gas, for example, that affect your nervous system, and they can kill you within hours. Just to name one example. But apart from the environmental sphere, what else can be done?
Well, the fact is that another aspect that can be used and is regarding social media. And so you have almost everyone in the Middle East has a smartphone, and they have access to social media. There can be campaigns on social media platforms that are in languages that are used in the Middle East. There are wonderful multimedia visuals that can be used in order to provide the proper messaging of the dangers of weapons of mass destruction that are discussing often flawed assumptions that a lot of people say, oh, well, we can rely on the rationality of our state by having those WMDs, that they're not going to use them. Well, accidents happen all the time. There could be a new state form out of nowhere. And then, as we said, there could be leaks. They could end up in the wrong hands, in non-state actors. And so social media campaigns can actually touch upon this topic, and through proper messaging, through using a language that the average person can understand, you can actually pick their interest in this, and you can actually promote civil society grassroots activities in universities and societies across the Middle East.
But Dina, this just seems like an ideal. I mean, obviously, nothing is ever perfect, but this seems like a close to ideal form of activism when it comes to WMD disarmament and other disarmament, other arms control initiatives in the Middle East and elsewhere, really. And social media, as you said, is very strong in the Middle East, and it's a very powerful tool. I mean, we saw this in the Arab Spring, for example. But why is it that a lot of international initiatives, when it comes to WMD disarmament issues and other arms control issues, and even wider issues in the Middle East, why don't they seem to be tapping into this enough? And not just social media, but other forms of communication. Why don't they seem to be tapping into wider civil society and social engagement?
Well, the truth of the matter, Zain, is that apart from bureaucratic barriers, cultural barriers, and language barriers, it also has to do with lack of jobs in the field. If we're looking within the Middle East, there are very few people who have a full expertise on the topic. So I've met people who have fully dedicated their lives to the topic of WMD disarmament within the Middle East. And it's a long, arduous effort. And so there's always a question of, is it even worth it to promote civil society on this? Is it even worth it to discuss this topic?
Yeah,
it takes a lot of patience and and funding. There are very few jobs in the Middle East. You can only get a job mostly within academia, or if you
Yes.
have a diplomatic or military background.
But Dina, okay, so clearly we know that these barriers exist in terms of jobs. But for me, it's very strange that not enough international initiatives when it comes to WMD disarmament in the Middle East are targeting young people from the region enough and involving them more. What do you make of that?
I think it has also to do with condescending beliefs and perceptions towards civil society in the Middle East. There is a perception that, the culture in the Middle East does not understand civil society. The culture in the Middle East is not fit for activism. There are all very negative perceptions of society within the Middle East. And I think this perception hinders international organizations who oftentimes have little to no experience in actually engaging with the society in the Middle East, and so they're not even allowing themselves this process. And so,
Exactly. Dina, before we leave, because we've come to the end of our show, and I just can't believe it because we're having such an interesting conversation, and it's an important conversation. Are there any last words that you want to say before we end our show?
well, Zain, we can talk for hours on this topic.
And we will,
and we just touched the surface today. The last words that I can give is weapons of mass destruction are very dangerous weapons. They're extremely costly. We should not rely on the rationality of our states. We should, people need to be aware of the dangers of those weapons, their existence, their stockpiling, and the money that's going into the creation and the maintenance of those weapons of mass destruction. My last words is to say that when it comes to civil society in the Middle East, we have highly educated people. We have so much potential, people who have an ambition. They want to have a better life for themselves and for their next generations. There is a potential within the Middle East, and we can have grassroots initiatives, and as well as international organizations can do a lot of work in the Middle East in engaging not just with the state level on geostrategic issues, but they should start approaching universities, environmental societies, and grassroots efforts in promotion and support of WMD disarmament awareness in the Middle East.
Yes, exactly. And on that note, very beautifully put, Dina Saadallah, from my friend and security analyst from Jordan. Thank you so much for joining me today. You tuned in, everybody. Thank you for joining me and Dina in this interesting conversation. You tuned into ReviveFM 94.0 with your host, Zain Hussain, talking about WMD disarmament issues in the Middle East. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Amigos.